Right now downtown, we are looking at mostly cloudy skies, 65 degrees. KOGO News Time, 6:42.
You know, after Junior Seau's death by suicide, many football players having concussion-related illness, some high schools are getting very serious about concussion, installing sensors in football helmets designed to keep records of how hard a player is hit, as well as the force of the hit.
Dr. Chad Stevens is a specialist on concussions. And Dr. Stevens, this so-called smart helmet doesn't stop concussions, so how do they help?
Good morning. Thank you for having me on your show. The answer to that question is that they give us real-time, up-to-the-minute, on the sideline on an iPad or iPhone data that tells me and the athletic training staff about a hit that has taken place in the game or in a practice situation, as the case may be, that could be consistent with a head injury, possible concussion, and it gives us indication that sometimes we need to bring those kids out and actually evaluate them and do a neurologic treatment on them or exam on them before returning them back to the game.
You know, what treatment can you do for someone who's had a brain injury?
There is, that's a great question. As far as what do I do is a procedure that is after we've determined that a player is not going to be able to return, and after we've recognized that they are having head symptoms such as headache, dizziness, trouble concentration, whatever the case may be, I do a treatment called the sphenopalatine ganglion block, which is a nerve complex behind the nose, which is involved in migraine headache. And we know that post-concussion headaches are migraines by definition, and so we've started treating them like that. And so that's the answer to your question. But as far as in the game time situation, there's really nothing we do to immediately return a player to play. In Texas, anyway, the rule is that if they have one concussion or one diagnosed concussion in practice or game, they're done for that event.
So how popular are these smart helmets? Do we know how many schools have them and how much they cost?
Yes, they are, rather than the helmet being smart, it's actually a sensor that can go inside of any helmet. There's several different sensors on the market, and after looking at the different sensors, this is the one that I suggested the school that I take care of go with, and they are cheap. They're about $100 per player per year, and that is very cheap when you consider the fact that somewhere around 10% of varsity football players will have a concussion in a given season. That's a pretty good amount of investment for money spent. You also consider what an ER visit might cost somebody. I don't know how it is in your state, but an ER visit can be upwards of a couple $1,000 depending on what is done by a doctor or studies done.
Now, ultimately, I guess, or let me just ask you, do we have to try to stop concussions from happening? And as someone who specializes in them, is there a way to keep kids' heads safe in contact sports?
That's a great question. When you look back at the way things have evolved over the last several years, they've tried to change some rules with youth sports and with collegiate and pro sports, and every game on Saturday you see a hit and you go, oh, that guy's going to get ejected, and then lo and behold they don't, and you wonder why, and the rules experts aren't even always sure what a targeting hit really classifies as. But they're trying to make some rules, but what I've determined is that, at least in my own practice, the best way to take care of our athletes is to help keep them as well guarded from the equipment side as you can, and to help keep them as well protected from repeated hits that are being detected, and take them out of harm's way from that, and then getting them back to their life after a concussion sooner with the treatment I described. And so I have a lot of our athletes on my sixth grade boys team included in a Kevlar insert that goes in the helmet that decreases the amount of a hit substantially, up to 50%. And so that decreases the amount of concussions or head injuries I see over the years that I've been using that in the helmets of our players.
Well, let's hope more schools go for something like that, Doctor. Dr. Chad Stevens, specialist on concussions, joining us on the KOGO News Live line.
We have more and more high schools using smart football helmets to detect concussions.
They're actually sensors that are installed in helmets. Dr. Chad Stevens explains how they work.
They give us real-time, up-to-the-minute, on the sideline on an iPad or iPhone data that tells me and the athletic training staff about a hit that has taken place in the game or in a practice situation, as the case may be, that could be consistent with a head injury, possible concussion, and it gives us an indication that sometimes we need to bring those kids out and actually evaluate them and do a neurologic treatment on them or exam on them before returning them back to the game.
Dr. Stevens says the sensors aren't that expensive, about $100 a piece. And he says when you compare that to the thousands spent on an ER visit, it's really an easy decision. But is there really a way to keep your kids completely safe?
I have a lot of our athletes on my sixth grade boys team included in a Kevlar insert that goes in the helmet that decreases the amount of a hit substantially, up to 50%. And so that decreases the amount of concussions or head injuries I see over the years that I've been using that in the helmets of our players.
There are several different companies marketing concussion sensors and smart helmets to high schools. Ted Garcia, KOGO News.